With the new raid fragments having been now unlocked, this final iteration of the Warlock PvP Arc 3.0 build is absolutely insane. Forget about Juggernaut Titans, forget about Blink Hunters, this Warlock PvP build I've constructed has one of the best neutral gameplays I've ever seen on any class. This build has it all. Incredibly fast movement on demand which lets you pull off some crazy plays, the best melee ability that lets you teleport and one-shot enemies, up to 2, yes, not just 1, but 2 turrets that can spawn, with one of them being overcharged to the max thanks to the amplification buff, and near maximum uptime on said amplification. And guess what? The iteration I'm going to show you today doesn't require any artifact mods, so it's completely future-proof. In this video, I'm going to break it down into 3 sections: the Arc 3.0 build in terms of fragments and aspects, the armor I'm using, including my exotic, and then the weapons I recommend to pair with this build. All in all, I think you're going to be seeing a ton of this build in trials and regular quick play, both on PC and console, as its neutral play is one of the best I've ever seen. If you find what I talk about today remotely helpful, then drop a like as that helps the video out a ton. So let's get into the build. So for our class ability we're using Healing Rift, our jump is Burst Glide, and then for our melee we're using Chain Lightning, as it has a shorter cooldown than Ball Lightning, which will become important when we talk about our aspects. Then for the grenade we're using Flashbang Grenade, which has the shortest cooldown of any arc grenade. Again, this will become important when we talk about our armor later. For the aspects, I'm using Lightning Surge, which converts your regular melee into a teleporting melee when sliding. Now this for me is probably the best melee in the game currently. It can counter people around corners, it can counter people using a barricade, and it absolutely annihilates enemies that bunch up together. If there's multiple enemies, it can one-shot them thanks to the fact it jolts and chains lightning. Even if there's just one guy you're pushing, you can one-shot them thanks to a fragment I'm going to talk about later. This melee is just an incredible evasive tool as well. For the second aspect, we're going to be using Arc Soul. Now, even with the exotic I'll talk about later, it's important to have this aspect as you want to extend the duration of your Arc Soul buddy with Rift. For the fragments, I'm using Spark of Recharge to gain my abilities back faster, Spark of Resistance for the damage resist, Spark of Vaults for the 10 recovery boost, though if you're using an arc weapon, an arc special weapon, then Spark of Beacons is a better option here, as you're going to be amplified a ton in this build and you're going to blind enemies with little explosions from your arc special weapon kills. So if you're using something like Main Ingredient or Adored, definitely stick to that fragment instead of Spark of Vaults. And then the new fragment, Spark of Feedback. Now this thing is pretty nuts. My friend here melees me, and for 6 seconds my teleport melee can now one-shot individual people as well, and doesn't rely on jolts to one-shot. The fact that my melee damage is increased enough to do that is crazy. Finally, super-wise, I'm running regular Stormcaller, as this now has both landfall and teleport built into it. But if you prefer, Chaos Reach is just as viable here. So now moving on to the armor. Armor-wise, the exotic at the center of the build we're using is Getaway Artists, which when consuming your grenade, creates a supercharged version of Arc Soul called Sentient Arc Soul. In addition, this now gives you amplification on demand. Amplification takes your Sentient Arc Soul to the next level and makes it supercharged. I can't emphasize how juiced up this amplified Sentient Arc Soul is. It fires a burst of 6 shots which each hits for 11. It's finishing enemies I shotgun up close, and it's finishing enemies from miles away with my pulse rifle. Amplification also lets you activate Speed Booster when sprinting, which makes you hit the speed boost cap. Even equipping any lightweight weapons on top of this won't make you go faster when it's active. The slide with this speed boost is pretty much similar to the Cryoclasm slide that Titans get with Stasis. It's absolutely bonkers, and it lets you pull off some ridiculous ape shotgun plays. Now, with this exotic, you don't actually need the Arc Soul aspect to gain your Arc Soul. You can get a Sentient Arc Soul without it, but I highly recommend the aspect because it allows you to extend the Arc Soul timer when you drop a rift, and it means you can have 0 downtime on your Arc Soul. In terms of armor mods, I'm running the Grenade Kickstart mod on my arms, and then Utility Kickstart on my class item, so I get my abilities back even faster. And then I'm running the usual Powerful Friends, Radiant Light, High Energy Fire, so I can get some bonus 20% damage on occasions, and then the relevant dexterity mods on my helmet and arms. Now, instead of double utility kickstart, there are some artifact mods which could enhance this build. You do have Amped Up on the class item, which only costs 1 energy, and then it's going to extend your amplification uptime. The other mod is Lightning Strikes Twice, which increases grenade recharge rate, but honestly, I practically had my grenade or arc soul up pretty much all the time. So I don't think lightning strikes twice is necessary for this build. For the stat distribution, I highly recommend 100 discipline as your number one priority, and equally 100 recovery, so that you can spam your arc soul as much as possible, and 100 recovery is just a great stat in PvP in general. Then I'd recommend as high a strength as possible for the teleport melee, and finally you want some decent mobility for strafe speed, and then some resilience and intellect in that order. So moving on to weapon recommendations. For our primary weapon, the weapon I recommend to pair with this build is No Time to Explain. Now, No Time to Explain is in the same archetype as Messenger and has a 2 burst potential with a very small TTK of 0.67 seconds. When you get 10 headshots with this thing, it's going to spawn another turret next to you. Having 2 of these up in one build is bonkers. The gun itself is extremely strong, and it's a great gun on PC especially, but it's great on console as well. Other primary weapons do work just as well with this build, such as Peace of Mind, or any hand cannon, such as Ostringer, Fatebringer, you name it. They're all going to work really well with this build. Special weapon wise, I absolutely loved using a shotgun with this build, especially when paired with the speed booster amplification. And contrary to what I said earlier about lightweight not stacking with the speed boost, I'd still recommend using a lightweight shotgun, so that when you don't have the speed booster active, you can still obtain a sprint boost speed. And right now, for me, lightweight shotguns are probably the most consistent. A crafted without remorse for the energy slot, or Wastelander for the kinetic slot, is probably going to be your best bet with this build. So there you have it guys, my Warlock Arc 3.0 build that absolutely tears up the Crucible. Try it out. Honestly, I'm not sure why people are saying Warlock suck for Arc 3.0. This build is my favorite in PvP out of the 3 classes. If you enjoyed what I talked about today, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Destiny content as we get into the meat of the new season. I'm Mr. On It, and that's it for today. Peace out, guys.